We're live, woohoo! I'll wait a couple seconds for it to show up on our computers, but greetings, people in internet land. There's always like this 10-second delay I know you're getting it, but I don't know until I get it right here, so I just talk randomly. Okay, yeah, you gotta mute it. I got a new host tonight, a new sidekick. So the last couple of weeks, we've had Bobby down here playing my Ed McMahon. Tonight we have Mr. Major Brad Fleury.
Highlight of my life being here with you this evening, Steve.
See, there you go. See, that just kind of summarizes what most people already think, right? That it's a highlight of their evening. I'm glad I could do this. It's important. And as people are tuning in, I hope everything's going okay with you guys, enjoying the wonderful weather, being outside a little bit. And we've talked about the last couple of weeks, we've had a different sort of food discussion every week. We started with brisket and barbecue, and then we've kind of gone through all the different sides. And I think about all the my problems with nanner pudding, and I'm sort of I still tense up a little bit saying it. But today I want to talk about other controversial opinions, and I have a couple of controversial food opinions, but I want to expand it to a couple of just general controversial opinions to begin with. So let's start with. We'll start roughly in the barbecue thing. So if you have any responses to my controversial food opinions, you put them in the comments, and Brad will let me know. Or if you have your own controversial food opinions, you let me know. Now, so here's the first one. And this isn't just like someone saying Mr. Pibb's better than Dr. Pepper. Okay, that's not controversial. That's wrong. And I still am frustrated by the fact that we go to a church in the state of Texas, a Baptist church in the state of Texas that has Mr. Pibb in the soda machines. I don't want to tell the convention that. We might get in trouble. But here is controversial opinion number one. I am okay with beans and chili. Okay, I'm okay with it. Now, I suppose you're thinking to yourself, are you serious? Why the real Texas chili doesn't have beans in it? And I get that, and I kind of prefer it without the beans. Okay, I'm not saying I don't prefer it that way, but I'm okay with beans and chili, and here's why. One, remember we talked last week or maybe the week before about Tex-Mex? How Texas does amazing things to food. It takes things that are normal, takes an original thing and turns it into something new. That's sort of the essence of America. It takes this thing that's already good and transforms it in a new way. It really is a melting pot. And so the first question is, how did beans get in the chili? So if chili was invented in Texas, how did beans get in chili? And it's actually a cool story. Beans got into chili during the Great Depression. So during the Great Depression, there was food shortages, people out of work, and churches doing soup lines, and an easy way of extending the soup and adding protein, a cheaper protein, is by putting beans in the chili. And so chili was a prominent soup on soup lines. Beans was an easy way to add protein, and that was the moment when chili sort of expanded beyond the borders of Texas. And so, right at the point when chili was going nationwide, it had beans in it. That's why most people outside of Texas put beans in their chili. And I'm kind of okay with it. Maybe for that reason, because it seems like there's a cool historical tradition. So, how do you feel about beans and chili? Any controversial responses so far?
Well, Steve, unfortunately, there are a couple of people that agree with you. I think you put beans in chili, you've now made soup, so you've changed the nomenclature. So McCorkindalls, they prefer beans and chili.
Oh, my goodness.
They base it on the health reasons.
Prefer
Bobby,
it, okay.
Bobby, you're supposed to have the night off, and he's listening and says he likes beans. He's dead to me now too. So
I'm not saying I prefer it. I'm just saying I'm okay with it.
Okay with it.
Okay. Now, I lived in Philadelphia for a couple of years, and while I was there, the church I was working at had a chili cook-off. Okay, it's like, okay, me and my friend, my roommate, we were Texas boys. We're going to win this. We're strangers in a strange land, but we can win a chili cook-off. And so we go there, and that's when I realized this is the edge. We made chili. The people who won it made 5-bean stew. right? It was 5-bean soup, and it was good, but it wasn't chili. And so, yeah, I don't want soup, but I'm okay with it. Okay. But I think, though, if you make Frito pie, it has to, I'm not sure it has beans in it. By the way, Frito pie is one of those essential Texas things. It's so joyful, right? You can take a Frito bag, put chili in it, and you call it pie. That's like the most Texas thing in the world. And my favorite, there's a place in Waco called VTEX. And now it's owned by the children of VTech. But Mr. VTech used to own it when I was in college at Baylor. And he had this little barbecue shack, and he was like the soup Nazi of Texas barbecue. He was open from Monday through Thursday. He was open just for lunch, and he didn't need any friends, and so he didn't take any. A friend of mine came in one time and was like, "So what do you got here?" And he tried to chat him up, and he's like, "Look, Mr. VTech said, I don't need any more friends, but I'll sell you barbecue if you want." and so exactly right. It's like, "No soup for you. Get out of here." And but they had a thing called the Gut Pack, and it was Frito pie plus brisket. It was free. It was like one of those standard to-go squares, and it was Fritos, chili. They put their barbecue beans on it, and then they put their brisket on top of it, and then cheese and onions. Oh my goodness, it was huge. It was like a meal for 3 days. But so I don't know if they still have it. Anybody in Waco can verify the continued existence of the Gut Pack. But so there's my first controversial opinion. Second controversial opinion, still food-based. And this is where I have to kind of rely upon the general goodwill of the people that people are listening. This is supposed to be a safe space where everybody is welcome and included, because what I'm about to say is an incredibly vulnerable thing. It has to do with pizza toppings. Okay, again, this goes beyond just things I'm okay with. This is actually something that I like. And it's taken a long time. Brad, what are you worried I'm going to say? Brad?
Fruit.
Yeah, so here's something I resisted for a long time, and that is pineapple on pizza.
Oh man, we just need to close in prayer, Steve.
Exactly. So Brad's
we
praying for
just
my
need to-
soul right now. Wish you could see Brad down here in the front row. He's bowing in prayer. But here's how I made this choice. Now it's not just it doesn't need. You can't just put it on the pizza. It needs one more thing to make it addition. And here is the thing that clinched it for me. So Canadian bacon, pineapple, it's good if you add jalapenos, okay? Because citrus and jalapeno just go together. It just goes together. And so the first time I ever had I like pineapple in general. Like I got one of those. You ever seen those corkscrews? Those pineapple corkscrews? Go to H-E-B, buy a pineapple corkscrew, and I can eat pineapple until my gums bleed. But the first time someone ever had I was at a Super Bowl party, and they had a habanero salsa. And it was just habanero and chunks of pineapple, and it just worked. And then the next sort of step into the dark side was someone brought a jalapeno, no Canadian bacon, but jalapeno and pineapple pizza, and I tried it, and I didn't hate it. And that's when I had to finally admit. The funny thing is there was a pizza buffet that my kids used to like to go to, and it was a really good one. It's out in Brookshire. And they used to, they'll make whatever pizza you want, really good pizza. And one time, they said, "Would you like us to make any pizza for the buffet?" And I sort of sheepishly was like, I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to admit it. My wife said, "He wants to ask for you to make a pineapple jalapeno pizza, but he's afraid because he feels like he'll judge
That was
him."
the last time you guys were there, correct?
Exactly right. We were banned. We were banned.
And there's some people disagree with you, Steve. I mean, Joe Landy actually just simply said you are wrong for this.
See, and
I agree with Joe. He is right.
See, this is why it's called controversial opinions, right? We are tackling tough questions, and we're grabbing the bull by the horns.
That's good.
Although that time was also the time at that pizza buffet that I discovered. It was the first time I'd ever been personally in the presence of anchovies on pizza.
Now, is this Orlando's in Brookshire?
It is.
And you know they have a pizza named after Omar Garcia.
They
our
do.
missions pastor. They do.
Huh.
It's like a white sauce with bacon, and they have. If you go there and ask for the Omar Garcia, they will make you one.
See, okay, so I need to do this. Okay, so I'm not a big white sauce on pizza. That's my version of pineapple. I don't want the white sauce, but the bacon on pizza, amazing. So, but we go to Orlando's, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I get a slice of pizza. It looks like combination pizza. And I go sit down, and I sit down, I'm like, smells like feet over here. It smells like dirty dishwater. I don't know what's going on. I think it's like someone's mopped the floor, I don't know. I move to a different table, and I'm like, it's over here too. And no matter where I go, I couldn't find. And finally, I looked at my pizza, and it had like this little shriveled thing on it. It was the first time I'd ever actually been in the presence of anchovies on pizza, and it smelled like feet. So there's my controversial opinion number 2. I know it's hard for many people to accept. Hope you don't judge me. Let me take you to controversial opinion. We're getting out of the realm of food. Controversial opinion number 3. And this is hard, again, this might get a little technical. This might touch a little heartstrings, but controversial opinion number 3, and I'm finally willing to accept it. Pluto is not a planet. Pluto is not a planet. There's a lot of good reason to think this. I know it's nostalgia for you. I know that when you grew up, Pluto was a planet. Well, guess what? It's not. Here are the reasons why. First off, it's super, super, super small. If you took the country of Russia and made it into a ball, it would be bigger than Pluto. Okay? If Pluto is a planet, so outside of Neptune, there's a whole bunch of things called trans-Neptunian bodies. And if Pluto's a planet, there are like 7 or 8 other things out there that should be planets too. But also, it doesn't fit a couple of criteria for planets. One of the definitions of a planet is it has to be big enough to have cleared its orbital space, which means nothing else is in that orbit. Well, you know that Pluto hasn't done that. Pluto kind of has this wonky kind of intersecting orbit. It looks more like a trans-Neptunian body. Also, if you look at all of the planets, almost all of them are on a perfectly horizontal elliptical plane, like orbital plane. We all orbit on the same plane. But if you looked at it, they're all kind of like flat around the sun. But Pluto comes in like this. Pluto is this weird sort of non-flat orbit. And so, not a planet. So accept it. Controversial opinion 3. Now 4. Last one before we dive in tonight. Hopefully you won't tune me out because of this, but this is important. This goes against everything I was raised with, and maybe you're not old enough to know or care. But Oswald acted alone. Oswald acted alone. That's just the way it goes. I grew up on Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories. Heck, I saw JFK by Oliver Stone in the movie theaters when I was growing up. And man, you want to believe in the conspiracy theories, but they're just simply not true. It's funny. I came to this conclusion because I defended my dissertation the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, several years ago, and I had the weekend. I had Thanksgiving weekend and the next week to finalize. I normally have like a month to do your corrections. I had like a week and a half, and so my family cleared out, and I just had the whole house to myself over Thanksgiving weekend while I was trying to correct my dissertation to submit it in time to graduate in the fall. And of course, Kennedy was assassinated right around Thanksgiving weekend, November 22nd. By the way, interesting, great book. If you're looking for a book to read, Between Heaven and Hell by Peter Kraft. It's a very short, easy-to-read book. It's a dialogue or a trilogue between JFK, C.S. Lewis, and Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, all of which died on the same exact day, November 22nd, 1963. And this is an imagined dialogue between these 3 men they meet beyond death, between heaven and hell. And they talk about their worldviews. C.S. Lewis represents the Christian, Aldous Huxley represents the pantheist, and JFK represents the sort of the secular humanist. Amazing read. But so because of that, I had the TV on in the background, and I was correcting my dissertation, laptop on my lap, and I just sort of was engrossed in all those history documentaries about the Kennedy assassination. And I did my own little research, and I came to the conclusion that Oswald acted alone. There's a lot of good reason, but the clincher for me is this. The infamous Zapruder film, right, that supposedly shows the shot from the grassy knoll, and it almost supposedly shows you it has to be a shot from the front. There are good reason to think that the magic bullet actually does work. But 2, there couldn't have been a shot from the grassy knoll because Abraham Zapruder was standing right next to it. So if this is Abraham Zapruder, we forget that the Zapruder film isn't an omniscient narrator. He's standing, like he has this camera right here, and the shot comes from right here. If you look at where Dealey Plaza is, go to Dallas. When I actually did the Kennedy assassination tour one time when I was in Dallas for a conference, where Kennedy's car was when it was parked, where if for a shot from the grassy knoll would have hit Kennedy in the ear. That's why the original conspiracy theorists that talked about a frontal shot said it came from the triple overpass straight ahead, because that's the way Kennedy's car was facing. So I can go into more detail, but controversial opinion number 4, Oswald acted alone, and he's got to learn to accept it.
Ms. Steve, you've spoken about outer space, assassination of presidents, but nothing has resonated more than beans and chili and fruit on pizza. So if you just want to know where people, where they're passionate about, you can have all your conspiracy theories,
exactly,
but leave our food alone.
Yeah,
so
believe what you want about planets and presidents, but don't you put the fruit on the pizza, and don't you put those beans in the chili.
That's right.
So,
wisdom is knowing tomato is a fruit, right? Knowledge is wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad.
Exactly right. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed those conspiracy theories and controversial opinions. Hopefully it gave you the guts to maybe articulate and experiment and go beyond the borders of your own personal comfort zone. Let's open up in prayer, and then we're going to dive into our study tonight. Father, in the name of Jesus, we ask your blessing upon this time. Thank you for all of the ways in which we've been blessed by you and equipped by this church to be able to wrestle with tough issues. Thank you that you give us freedom, but you also give us a brain and you encourage us to seek. As we seek to wrestle with tough issues, I pray that you would be present. Jesus said that the Spirit would come and lead us in truth. Father, lead us in truth tonight. Help us to speak clearly and reason clearly. Help us to use the brains you gave us, and help us to seek you and find you when we seek you with all our heart. I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. So we are doing a couple-week series on tackling tough questions, being free to ask big questions. We did the problem of evil last week. We're going to talk about the hiddenness of God tonight. Next week is going to be the question of the problem of religious disagreement. If God is real, if God is true, how come all the religions can't decide what is true about God? Isn't it easier to say he isn't there? And then the fourth week, the last week, is going to be sort of an open-ended thing. So if you have questions that you've always wanted to ask, either leave them in the comments here or send me an email at sjones@kingsland.org. If you have questions about what I say tonight, I'll have some time for questions at the end. Leave them in the comments. But yeah, I want to take a chance to answer the questions that you have, because here's the deal. We sometimes live in a culture that punishes ignorance. Not just the church. Yes, a lot of churches, because either they don't have answers or they feel intimidated by questions, have used far too long this idea of you just got to have faith. I don't know how many times good questions have been shut down by some Sunday school teacher somewhere saying, oh, you just got to have faith, or what's wrong? Are you losing your faith? When it's not actually that. It's someone actually growing their faith by asking a great question. But we live in a culture that punishes ignorance. Ignorance isn't a vice. Ignorance when you've had an opportunity to learn, maybe, but there is so much stuff to learn in this world, you can't possibly know it all. And so if you don't know something, you're automatically condemned. Go watch any movie. And one of the ways in which they introduced major plot lines is some random person shows up on campus, on the whatever, it's like, what's going on here? And someone says, oh, what are you, stupid? Don't you even know? And so we punish people for not knowing. I heard one guy one time say, instead of punishing people for not knowing stuff, because it's impossible to know everything, realize if you meet someone who doesn't know something you do, that you get the opportunity to teach them that. So instead of saying, I can't believe you have never heard about Mentos and Diet Coke. How have you gone this whole life without knowing Mentos and Diet Coke? The correct answer is, I got $20. We're about to have the greatest afternoon of your life. Okay, you get to do it instead of criticizing people. I guess sometimes we treat information like power, and if we have it, we sometimes can control other people, and we're better than other people. We use it to exalt ourselves. But no, not just our culture, not just our church. We need to reward seeking and asking good questions. It's never too late to ask the question that's been on your mind. Our society punishes, the church does, but Christianity is an evidence-giving religion. It rewards seeking. Nowhere, we're told to have faith, but nowhere are we told to blindly shut our eyes to facts. Thomas has questions. He wants to see Jesus before he believes he's arisen from the dead, and Jesus shows up. Faith isn't closing your eyes to truth. Faith works hand in hand with the truth you've accepted, reminding you of what you've believed in those moments when it's easier to forget. You see, faith helps you be steadfast when you feel tempted to do something, when you become forgetful of the truth you've accepted. And so we're asking tough questions, and we're dealing with doubt. Before we dive too deeply into this question, I want to remind us of the two kinds of doubt. The two kinds of doubt, because so many times one of the reasons why people respond the way they do in the church or even to tough questions about faith and religion and philosophy and things like that is because the questions get asked in two different ways. There's healthy, honest doubt. There's healthy, honest doubt that just doesn't know. It's humble. It wants to know answers, and it doesn't have them, and it realizes it needs them, and it realizes it's lacking something. And it's looking for it. It's seeking those answers. And it's convincible. It's open to the idea that you could be wrong, and you want to know the truth and have it given to you. And it's honest. It says, look, these are my questions. This is my doubt. This is my objection. This is what I'm having a hard time with, and is upfront about it. Puts all the cards on the table. But there is a dishonest, sort of unhealthy doubt that's arrogant. It uses doubt as a smokescreen. It says it doubt, but it's actually convinced. I know that this isn't true, and uses doubt as a smokescreen to ask uncomfortable questions to make other people feel bad. It's stubborn. No matter what answers you give somebody, they refuse to believe. They're sticking to where they are. If honest doubt is seeking, it's moving, it's looking. Stubborn doubt, it refuses to move. It's unconvincible. No matter what you give the person, they always find one other thing to believe because the question wasn't really the question. The question was something to demolish your belief, but their doubt is actually rooted in something else. And ultimately, it's rebellious. It uses doubt as a smokescreen to let the person live however they want. Now, the truth is, we're both a blend of all of that. Like, none of us are either one or the other. Behind even the most unhealthy doubt is a little question, an idea, a kernel, a need. And even behind the most honest doubt is this idea that, man, if this isn't true, then I can live however I want. We're all a weird combination of seekers and sinners, and that's okay. But trying to be honest about it is the important part. I think one of the greatest examples of how you can test your doubt is by seeing how you would respond to what Jesus says to the Sadducees. Jesus gets confronted by the Sadducees, who are trying to show how stupid the resurrection is. Here, let me pose this problem and let me put you in an uncomfortable situation, not because we want to know the answer, but because we want to see you squirm with a seemingly unprovable problem, kind of like the Bible version of the Kobayashi Maru or something. And after Jesus sort of takes them to school, he says in Mark 12:27, he simply looks at them and goes, "About this you are greatly mistaken." To a person who has honest doubt, who said, "I don't know how God could exist with all the evil in the world. I don't know how," and someone who honestly wants answers, and someone says, and to have somebody who's more convinced go, "You're greatly mistaken about this." There's a reassurance, like, "Okay, good. I'm mistaken about this. I'm glad." But a person who is stubbornly arrogant and gets confronted with the problems with their position gets told by Jesus, if you were told by Jesus, "You were greatly mistaken," and your first thought is to bristle, like, "You don't know me. Who are you to say that?" Well, guess what? You have arrogant doubt. Well, tonight we're going to look at this question of the hiddenness of God. If God is real, why can't I see him? If God is real, where is he? Why can't I see God? Where is God? It actually overlaps a little bit with our earlier question of the problem of evil. It's like, where is God in the midst of all of this evil? Shouldn't God have shown up by now? One of the best examples of the articulation of the problem goes something like this. Imagine you're walking through the woods, and imagine you come across a cottage with a yard and a gate around the yard and a fence around, and you look, and the gate is falling apart, the grass is overgrown, the gate's hanging on the hinges, the windows are broken, the shingles are falling in, and the house looks incredibly disrepaired. Which is more likely? There is an invisible gardener who has good reason for allowing his residents to be in this state of disrepair, or there's nobody home. Which is more likely? And that's the perfect articulation of the question. It's a good way, and you can wrestle with it. If you were walking through the woods, you wouldn't think, oh, there's just some invisible person here who wants to keep his house this way. No, you would think that house was abandoned. Well, the same is the truth with so goes the question. Look at all the evil in the world. Look how broken this world is. Look at how problematic this world. If God is real, shouldn't he have intervened by now? And so that's a perfect articulation. Well, how do you answer it? I want to start with maybe an easy or like maybe practical question, but it's an important answer. It's the first start. It's not really an answer. It's not really, but it's an important statement that needs to be addressed. And it goes something like this. Where is God? Why can't I see him? The first thing you need to realize is God is invisible. God is invisible. God is spirit. You can't see God. It's asking if God is real, why can't I see him? Is like asking if atoms are real, how come I can't see him? If germs are real, how come I can't see him? Well, if you look carefully with the right instruments, you can. And the same is true with God. If you look with the right instruments, you can find it. And the instruments aren't scientific instruments. The instruments are the human soul, and we'll talk about that later. But it's important to say. Sometimes we forget that God is God and he's not a person. And he's personal, but he's not physical like us. It's all throughout Scripture, though. John 1:18, no one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God who's in the bosom of the Father. He's explained him to us. Jesus, the reason why God sent Jesus was to show us the Father. Colossians 1:15 calls Jesus the image of the invisible God. The Greek word is icon. It's the physical representation. If you want to know what God looks like, look at Jesus. John 4:24, when Jesus meets the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, he tells her, God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. And so accepting that God is spirit and the essence of spirit is to be invisible, unable to be seen with our eyes, might not be a satisfactory answer, but it needs to be said at the beginning so that we realize what we're talking about. Now, the question always comes, what about those people who saw God, like in the Old Testament, who God revealed himself to? Again, it's a little technical, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's a distinction between God who is omnipresent and everywhere and imperceptible, and when God makes himself manifestly present to people. In the Old Testament, the word for that is sometimes called the angel of the Lord or the glory of the Lord. It happens, but those are sort of specific manifestations of who God is. But the real question that people ask, the question behind the question when people ask the hiddenness of God question goes something like this. You tell me to have a personal relationship with God, why can't I experience him more directly? I know how to have a personal relationship with my wife or with a friend. We go and we hang out and we have food, and I talk to them and they talk back. I speak and they speak to me. It's one of those, if you've never experienced this frustration, then you haven't asked this question. It's a great question. I remember being frustrated. I still am frustrated with every single book that I have read about prayer. Every single one. Because I buy these books, I don't even buy them anymore. I thumb through the table of contents, and every single one of them tells me how to talk to God. Here are the things you should say to God. Great. I know what I want to say to God. How do I know when God's talking back to me? And there's one half chapter about that, and it's normally not worth the price of admission. But it's a good question. If you tell me to have a personal relationship, don't tell me the stuff I need to do. I know what to do. Tell me how I can receive, how I can notice when God's trying to have that relationship with me. It's not just this blind faith where I acknowledge and intellectually assent to a set of truths and then engage in a set of religious activities. And if this is the God who wants to have a relationship with me, why does he make it so hard? If this God is real, what's the difficulty? Why does he not make himself more directly able to be perceived and experienced? Wouldn't this make belief in him a lot easier? Yes. If you've never asked this question, I encourage you to do so now. It's a great question to ask. And honestly, it can be asked in both the honest and dishonest way. One of my first real wrestlings with this question was when one time I asked a philosopher, like a professional philosopher, how would you answer the question, the problem about the hiddenness of God? And the person gave me an answer like I was an angry, stubborn, dishonest critic. Like I was just being problematic. Like this is how I would say this. And I was like, no. I'm not looking to play philosophical games or logical tricks. I really want to know the question. I really want to answer this question. What do I do when God feels far away? What do I do when I don't feel like, when I look around at the world and I don't see any evidence that God exists? When and I don't feel like he's interacting with me and I don't even know what to expect. That's the question. That's the question. And it needs an answer. And so what is it? Well, let me give you, like the problem of evil, we're only talking very briefly. And so what I hope to do tonight is whet your appetite. Give you a little bit of hooks to hang some important ideas and then maybe encourage you to keep going. I think there are good reasons to understand why God hides. The first reason why God hides is to give us freedom. When you were in college or high school or whatever, last time you sat in a room taking an exam, I am guessing there was a person in that room walking around observing you. In fact, there's never a more heart-wrenching and heart-pounding response in an exam than when you're walking down through all this stuff and the teacher looks over your shoulder, walks past you, and then says to the class, "Everybody, please make sure you read the question completely and carefully." Like, oh no, what mistake did I make? What mistake? Oh no. Also, when I was a professor, I learned a trick. There's a little bit of psychology. If I want to catch who's cheating, all I have to say is this phrase, and then watch how they respond. I say, keep your eyes on your own paper. Everybody keep your eyes on your own paper. And people who aren't cheating, look around. Like, who's cheating? Who's cheating? People who are cheating, look at me. They're like, did he see me? Did he see me? It's pretty cool. It's an interesting phenomenon. But God hides to give us freedom because the manifest presence of God in our life would overwhelm our free will. In the same way that proctor does. If you had wanted to cheat, the whole purpose of the proctor is to take away your desire to cheat by overwhelming you with a presence of authority. Any parent will tell you the sheerest indicator of the heart of a child is the things that they do when they think that they're not being observed. And so God withdraws to give us freedom because he is so powerful that his manifest presence would overwhelm our free will. And it's always been the case. This is what's crazy. This is the state of it before the fall. God put Adam and Eve in the garden and gave them room. He wasn't always there making sure that they did the right thing. Yes, we're going to talk a little bit. God is omnipresent. He is everywhere, but he's not manifestly present. And so he gave them freedom, and they used it to sin. And so one of the coolest verses in Genesis 3, 8, and 9, it says, "They heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to the man and said to him, 'Where are you?'" Think about how astonishing that is. An omnipresent, omniscient God asks Adam where he is. God gave him room. And that room gave him freedom. And that's really the first question. One of the ways in which God thinks that freedom is a very good thing, and so he knows that if we don't have the ability to say no, our yes means nothing. And so he gives us that room. This ultimately, I think, is what hell is. We'll talk more about hell next week when we talk about religious disagreement and how hell is not an evangelism strategy. The easiest way to think about it is it's where God finally just says, fine, you don't want to be with me, you don't have to be. I'm not going to force myself upon you. You have freedom to be apart from me. So that's the first thing, to give us freedom. Second, God gives us freedom to encourage us to seek him. To encourage us to seek him. So one, it's an act of love. He's not going to override our free will. But he's also going to leave enough in there to reward seeking. So in order to make himself known, he puts enough into the world to make belief in him reasonable to entice us to seek him. Ravi Zacharias, who just recently this week received some very powerful negative news that, regarding his health, but he very powerfully said one time, God has left enough in the world to make belief in him a reasonable and rational thing, and enough out of the world to allow sinful, selfish people to go about their business. He's not going to make you follow him, but he's going to encourage you to seek. And the promise is, those who seek find. Those who seek find. Jeremiah 29:13 says, you will seek me and you will find me when you search for me with all your heart. When you want this above all. Jesus told a parable. He said, to what should I compare the kingdom of heaven? It's like a man who finds a treasure hidden in a field. Out of joy over possessing it, sells everything he has to possess that field. You stumbled upon something you didn't realize was there, and you realize its amazing worth, and because of it, it transforms everything about you. He hides so that we'll seek. The promise is, and this is why I firmly believe, anybody who honestly asks questions is on a road that will lead them to Jesus. Because Jesus himself said in Matthew 7, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. Those who seek find. It might not be what you were looking for, but you will find the truth. You will find ultimately that what you were looking for has answers, and you will find them. God rewards seeking. One of my favorite passages in the Old Testament, in fact, so wonderful that I named one of my children after. In 2 Chronicles, we get the story of King Asa. And in 1515, when Asa comes to the throne, we get a prophet comes in and says, encouraging him to seek God earnestly. And it's what he does. And listen to what it says in 2 Chronicles 15:15. It says, all Judah rejoiced concerning this oath, for they had sworn with their whole heart and had sought him earnestly. And he let them find him. And so the Lord gave them rest on every side. They sought the Lord earnestly, and God allowed himself to be found by them. God hides so that we'll seek. God hides to awaken in us and a longing for what only he can satisfy and to draw us towards that life. All throughout Scripture, we get this constant reminder that we know that there's a hole inside of our heart, and we seek to fill it with other things. We want to be God, and we want to live apart from God, and we're afraid of God. Jeremiah says that we dig for ourselves broken cisterns that don't hold water. Why don't we go to the source of the water? And realizing when all of those other things we look to for fulfillment won't work, we go seek and search for those things, the one true thing. St. Augustine famously said in his Confessions in the very first chapter, he says, talking to God, he says, you made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. The moment you recognize that restlessness and long for what will satisfy, the moment you say all of those other things, all of those good things that were always meant to be blessings but never meant to be Lord's, aren't filling you up. The moment you say, you know what, financial freedom, physical pleasure, success, all of those things, they're good things, but they're never meant to be the thing you live for. It's what 1 John says is 1 John 2, it says, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. All of those things we get enticed to look after. We get enticed to seek after pleasure, or seek after possessions, or seek after position. Good things, but never meant to be the source. And the moment you realize that the thing, the lesser good that you've dedicated your life to that isn't filling you up, the moment you realize it's not filling you up, and you start looking beyond it, and beyond yourself for something that will satisfy you, that you've stepped on a road that will lead you to God. It's what C.S. Lewis calls the argument from desire. If I find in myself a desire that has no earthly fulfillment, maybe it's because I'm not made for this world. I get hungry because I come from a world where I need food. I get thirsty because I come from a world where I need water. I might not find it. I might die of thirst, but it means it exists. Book of Ecclesiastes says, God put eternity into the hearts of men, and we all long for it. And the moment you realize that, the moment you realize the wells you've been sitting on are broken cisterns, is the moment when you step on a path that will lead you to God. And Jesus promises that those who seek find, but you have to seek him and find him when you seek him with your whole heart. So that's the second reason. God hides to give us freedom. Second, God hides to encourage us to seek. And maybe this is the answer that you were expecting, but I saved it to the end because it's not satisfying when you say it up front. He doesn't hide. God doesn't hide. We miss him. We overlook him. We don't notice him. And this is the constant theme all throughout Scripture. Moments when people realize that there's more going on that they perceive. We've all had the experience when you've been looking at something but you're not really seeing, and you see something you never thought that you. My wife says that I do this all the time when I can't find something. Hey, will you go into the next room? I say, honey, have you seen my whatever? She's like, yeah, it's right there. And I know I looked there. It's not there. Yes, it is. You're looking, but you're not seeing. We all have this experience of it on small things, but we do it in big things too. In Genesis 28, when Jacob is going back to, he's fleeing, he's going to from Beersheba towards Haran, and he ends up he has this famous scene where he makes a camp out and he puts his head on a rock, and he has a dream of angels ascending and descending a ladder from heaven. And what's cool is, and God meets him and says, I'm the God of your fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and I'll be with you. And when Jacob wakes up, he says something very profound. In Genesis 28:16, he says, then Jacob woke up from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. The problem wasn't God, it was me. That I didn't know it. I was not aware that he was here. There's a story in 2 Kings when the prophet Elisha has upset the king of Aram, I think, and the king of Aram has sent horses and chariots to attack him, and they've surrounded him, and Elisha's attendant looks up and says, we're surrounded, it's pitiful, and 2 Kings 6:17, 15 through 17 says, now when the attendant of the man of God had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? And so he answered, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. He didn't see fully what was there. His eyes were veiled. And Elisha wasn't worried because he knew that God was surrounding him. And so he said, open this guy's eyes. He doesn't say make appear some more things. He says, show him what is already the case. And his eyes were unveiled and he saw things clearly. This is ultimately what I think the book of Revelation is about. A revelation, the Greek word apocalypsis, we think of it means the end of the world and calamity. Apocalypse, right? Apocalyptic, it sounds like destruction. The truth is, apocalypsis means revelation. It means to reveal. It's almost like a peek behind the curtain of reality. You see one thing, but if you could see what's happening in the divine realm or in God's dimension, then maybe you would understand better what God was up to. There is a hidden reality that we don't perceive, and something amazing is going on. It's trying to show us. Imagine you're a first century poor person in a big city like Ephesus, and you're being arrested for your faith and maybe murdered, and maybe you think, who cares if I get killed in this back alley? No one's going to notice. No one's going to care. It is insignificant. Why don't I just try to look after me? Revelation is a way of stripping back the curtain and seeing what looks insignificant in this world is actually a radical, important, powerful battle that is being waged, and you are a part of it. It's showing you the hidden reality of God's dimension. We miss it. One of the coolest discoveries of that, one of the coolest awarenesses of it comes from Psalm 139, this weird tension between God is technically omnipresent, omniscient, he knows everything, and he is everywhere, but sometimes I just miss it. I miss it. And Psalm 139, which is an amazing passage where the person, the psalmist, is grappling with this. He says, starts off, "O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Even before there was a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. You have enclosed me before and behind and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. I can't attain to it." He goes, "You know everything about me." It's not supposed to be like this negative Santa thing, right? Like he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. No, he's saying God sees you, God knows you, God is protecting you, God is leading you. You just sometimes we miss it. And then he says, wait, that means you are, no matter where I go, you're there. Verse 7, "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you're there. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me." He keeps saying, there is no place. What is going on that I miss it? But every place I go, I know you're there. If you skip down a few verses, it actually says in verse 17, one of the most frustrating translations of it says, "How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I could count them, they would outnumber the sand. When I awake, I am still with you." The phrase, "how vast are the sum of your thoughts to me," doesn't mean, they're vast compared in my perspective. No, the Hebrew word actually says, "How precious are your thoughts towards me." The idea is that God has a vast sum of attention and thought and consideration he lays on each one of us as an individual. So many times we think that God is so consumed with himself that he can't be bothered, that we're insignificant, that we don't matter. No, the psalmist realizes that God's omnipresence is actually radically focused on him. There's a Latin phrase, it says coram Deo, it means before the face of God. And that's every one of us. Every one of us is constantly living not just in God's presence, but with God's divine gaze directed at us. He knows us intimately. He made us. You are not an accident. He has a plan for us. He is leading us. And there's not a single place you have ever been or will ever go where you are far from his presence. That's why the psalmist says right there, "When I wake up, I'm still with you." And what is the response in all of this? It's one of those things we miss because the psalm is kind of long. It's 24 verses. But the psalm ends exactly where it begins. It started off with, "O Lord, you have searched me and you have known me. You know when I sit and when I rise." The only response to that, there are only two responses really to the omniscience and omnipresence of God. One, you can try to hide, but you'll never succeed. Or you can submit. That's why the psalmist ends in Psalm 139, "Search me, Lord, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious ways. See if there's any hurtful way in me and lead me in everlasting way." "Oh Lord, you have already done this. You've searched me and you have known me." It ends, "Search me, Lord, and know my heart." Do it. Ultimately, the truth is there are only two kinds of people in the world: those who seek God and those who seek to avoid God. And both will be successful in the end. One of my favorite expressions of how we sometimes miss the presence of God is expressed in a poem. I used a poem last week, Jesus of the Scars. I want to read a poem, one of my favorite poems, by a man named Francis Thompson. Francis Thompson is most known for his most famous for his poem called Hound of Heaven, about being pursued by God and how we keep running from God even though we know God loves us. We keep running from him. In fact, it has a really cool line in it. It says, "Though I knew his love who followed, yet I was sore afraid, lest having him I must have not beside." The idea that God was causing, that God wants you to have happiness, and one of the things he's causing you to do is to leave off all those things you think will bring you happiness besides him. But Francis Thompson was a powerful story of both genius and brokenness. He lived at the end of the 19th century. He died in 1907. He was a genius poet, an amazing intellectual, but he was also a heroin addict. He was an opium addict. He lived in the slums. In fact, he lived in one of the slums of London called Charing Cross, and he used to go get. He used to write letters to editor and write poems in rubbish and mail it to letters to editor to get them published, until one of the editors of one of these letters he wrote poems to found him, and tried to get him some help. But he wrote this poem called "Kingdom of God," and it's about how God doesn't hide. It's we who miss him. Listen to it. O world invisible, we view thee. O world intangible, we touch thee. O world unknowable, we know thee. Inapprehensible, we clutch thee. Does the fish soar to find the ocean, the eagle plunge to find the air, that we ask of the stars in motion if they have rumor of thee there? So does a fish have to go high to get an ocean, or an eagle have to soar, go down to find the air? No, he's just in it and doesn't realize it. Not when the wheeling system's darkened or our benumbed conceiving soars, the drift of pinions would we hearken beats at our own clay shutter doors. He says, our own benumbed conceiving. The fact that the problem is we're numb to God's reality. The angels keep their ancient places, turn but a stone and start a wing. 'Tis your estranged faces that miss the many-splendored thing. But when so sad thou canst not sadder, cry, and on thy soul sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder, pitched between heaven and Charing Cross. Yea, in the night, my soul, my daughter, cry, clinging heaven by the hems, and lo, Christ walking on the water, not of Gennesaret, but Thames. It's a powerful thing. He's saying, look, you miss the presence of God because our senses are numb to it. And the angels keep their ancient places, turn but a stone and start a wing. You're surrounded by a divine reality. You are the subject of the divine gaze. God's focus is on you, and you're in his presence constantly. But when in the night my soul, my daughter, cry, and on thy soul sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder. God meets us in our suffering. God promises that if we pour out our heart to him, he's close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in the spirit. That God will meet us, not when we are looking to have our intellectual questions scratched, but when we need our souls satisfied. When you ask it, when you cry and desperately need to know the presence of God, you'll find it. That's the hope, that's the promise, that's the reassurance. That God hides to give us freedom. God hides to encourage us to seek him. But ultimately, if you will start seeking, you will realize that you have never walked alone. You have never been far from the presence of God. You are not just in the presence of God, his face is towards you. And he is every step of the way, he has been with you. He is working all things to their appointed end, and he promises to work all things together for good for those that love him or call him according to his purpose. He is making all things new, and he invites us to participate in that. I don't know where this is hitting you tonight. I don't know maybe you've just wrestled with intellectually the problem of how to handle where is God? How can I see him? Where do I know him? Or maybe you are really struggling in the in the dark night of the soul. Maybe you are in the midst of a travail and a suffering and a confusion. You have no idea what's going on. Maybe you have the radical experience of feeling like God was nowhere. Cry out to him. See if he doesn't fulfill his promise. Be open to the possibility. I wish I could tell you this is what's going to happen. But God is a person, and God responds to each one of us in a personal way. He is living and real and personal and closer than you think. And if we will reach out to him, we will find that he's always been there. I hope this has been a good introduction. Let's close in prayer, and then we'll maybe answer any questions you might have. Father, forgive us when in our sin and in our rebellion, our senses become numb to your presence. Father, help us to be aware, show us for all the ways in which we need to hear, not to satisfy our intellectual curiosity, but to satisfy the hunger of our soul to know that we're not alone, to know that we have purpose, to know that we're not here by accident, to know that you are in control and that you see us and that you love us and that you are leading us down a path we should go. Help us to know that we are listening, that you are listening and you see us. Help us, Father, to cry out to you. And in the presence, may we see the traffic of Jacob's ladder on us. May we awake and say, surely you were in this place and I didn't see it. Help us to see it, Father. Unveil our eyes. Help us to experience you in a new and profound and a real way. Help us to seek you and find you when we seek you with our heart. I pray this in the name of Jesus and for his sake. Amen. All right, well, there aren't really any questions right now, so we'll wrap it up. If you do have questions that you want answered in a couple of weeks, let me know. Post them in the comments here. Send them to an email to sjones@kingsland.org. Otherwise, hope this helped, and have a good evening.